Turkey is stronger than Israel in every military aspect except one, and that's talking about the Air Force. Now Trump threatens to change that. How is Trump threatening to change this? Because Trump is entertaining the idea of selling F-35s to Turkey. And if Turkey gets its hands on a whole bunch of F-35s, and once Turkey has its indigenously built aircraft known as the Khan fighter jet, then that would mean Turkey having a serious advantage over Israel in every aspect of warfare. Because Israel prides itself in its Air Force. Israel's Air Force is really good. And currently, Israel's Air Force is better than Turkey's Air Force. But Turkey also has a bigger navy. So this is the one advantage that Israel has over Turkey in warfare. But it's a serious advantage. Serious advantage because, if you can't fight well in the skies and your enemy can fight better than you in the skies, you're kind of done for. So Turkey wants to ameliorate this gap in its military infrastructure. And if it does, then that would mean Turkey being superior to Israel in warfare in every single aspect of warfare. Ground, naval, drone, and air force. Turkey is stronger than Israel. Okay, I already read this. Turkey is positioning itself as one of the most serious threats to Israel. A trade boycott, a position that allows it to sabotage diplomatic ties, and above all, an army twice its size and armed with top-notch tanks and ships. And that's even before the fighter jets that Trump is considering giving to Erdogan. Turkey, which was the first Muslim country to recognize Israel, has become one of its greatest threats. And this is not just a theoretical matter. It seems that the turbulent waters between the countries have led to the severing of every anchor in their relations. Now, let me just also add that this was definitely indicated by Israel's Nodule Committee conference, which took place a number of months ago, in which the Nodule Committee, which was established by the Israeli government to make estimations in regards to Israel's defense, stated that Israel needs to prepare for a potential war with Turkey. Why is this? Well, because there was a giant power vacuum that was formed in Syria, partially thanks to Israel, because Israel backed the ousting of Bashar al-Assad, and now Turkey is controlling Syria, which means Turkey is right next to Israel. And Turkey is very powerful militarily, second most armed country in NATO. It hates Israel, and now it's smack right next to Israel. Israel should have seen this coming. I don't know what the hell they were thinking when they backed the Syrian revolution. Should have kept the eye doctor Bashar al-Assad in power. Trade relations between the countries were an island of stability until Erdogan decided to end them in May of last year due to the war in Gaza. Direct trade between Israel and Turkey dropped by 99.5% and 1.5 million in about a month. Although the Israelis found indirect ways, we already understood that dependence on Ankara for imports, 29% of cement products, 11% of plastic and rubber, and about 10% of textiles, was a broken reed. On the political front, Erdogan has positioned itself as one of the most problematic factors for Israel. He has taken advantage of his NATO membership and prevented the IDF from participating in the alliance's annual military exercise. So Israel wants to do training exercises with the other NATO armies, and Turkey says, nope, ain't gonna do it. We ain't gonna train with Israelis. We're not gonna train with Jews. Nope, not gonna happen. He is using his propaganda arms in all their languages in an attempt to damage our image. Keep in mind, this is an Israeli newspaper. That's why he says our. But above all, in the opinion of many, the most serious Turkish threat to Israel is military. Military. The army of Turkey is way bigger than that of Israel. The navy of Turkey is way bigger than that of Israel. The drone program is way bigger than that of Israel. The only edge that Israel has over Turkey is Air Force, which is very important and can definitely determine the conclusion of a war. But if Turkey forms a big enough Air Force or a more efficient and more powerful enough Air Force, Turkey will have the edge over Israel in every dimension of warfare. The Muslim country has the strongest navy in the region, and one of the best in the world, and a formidable manpower. That's talking about the army. But especially the physical presence in Syria makes a situation of Israelis and Turks fighting face to face a realistic one. So, looking at the tension between Israel and Turkey over Syria, the fact that the Turks want to control all the air bases in Syria, Israel doesn't want to have Turkey controlling all these air bases because Israel doesn't want a powerful Turkish Air Force right next to Israel. The fact that the Turks have taken over a pretty big air base in the Palmyra region in Syria, and then the Israelis came and they bombed the airway for that air base, for that specific air base, and that was a way for the Israelis to flex its muscles and to show the Turks who's boss. And the Turks have told the Israelis, we are not going to allow you to do this. You're going to be facing serious problems if you continue on with this. All these are signs of a future clash. But currently, Israel has only one advantage over Turkey when it comes to warfare. Turkey has an advantage over Israel in warfare in every aspect, in every dimension of warfare, with the exception of Air Force. If Turkey can make its Air Force as powerful as the Israelis, or more powerful than that of the Israeli Air Force, Israel has a serious problem. Serious problem. Erdogan's policy stems from two basic points. The first is that he is a political Islamist. He is a prominent figure in the Muslim Brotherhood, which is true. Turkey is the headquarters for the Muslim Brotherhood, which brings him closer to Qatar and terrorist organizations such as Hamas. The second is the Neo-Ottoman concept. Within the framework of this concept, Ankara is interested in restoring its former glory and positioning Turkey as a world power. And I was reading the last part. I got about 15 or so pages to go for this book on the Armenian genocide that I've been reading. And what I read yesterday was about the end of Turkey's involvement in World War I. It's pretty interesting because it touches upon the geopolitics of Bulgaria. If you look at a map, Bulgaria, so here is Turkey. Turkey sticks out like this. And then you have Bulgaria here. And then up here is the rest of the Balkans. So Adrianople is basically the bridge that Turkey has between itself and the Balkans. And Turkey is the bridge between the Balkans and Central Europe, specifically Austria and Germany. Once Bulgaria left the war, Turkey could no longer receive German assistance because the bridge between Turkey and Central Europe was broken, because Bulgaria was no longer a belligerent in the war. And so Turkey is pretty much right after Bulgaria pulled out of the war, Turkey pulls out of the war because it was no longer able to get German support. And because Germany at that point was no longer able to seriously get involved in the Middle East, that pretty much spelled the end of Germany's involvement in World War I. So Bulgaria leaving World War I was it was pretty much the telling sign that World War I was going to come to an end. But that story also entails the Middle East, because what happened after the fall of the Ottoman Empire was the Ottoman Empire lost all of its Middle Eastern territories. It lost the Arab Peninsula, it lost the Gulf, and it lost Syria, it lost Lebanon, and it lost Palestine, what we today call, for the most part, Israel. And as this article specifies, the Turks want to revive their former glory, the Neo-Ottoman Empire. So, if it wants to revive its Neo-Ottoman Empire, that means it wants to retake its old Middle Eastern territories. It has already taken Syria, so this is the beginning. We're seeing right now the beginning of the revival of the Ottoman Empire. Palestine, Israel, used to be also a part of Ottoman territory. So that would mean, hey, Israel, you're in Turkey's crosshairs. And Turkey is one step away from getting into Israel because it's in Syria right now. So it's looking very dangerous for the Israelis. Very dangerous. The second is I already read this. Let's go on. One of the most prominent manifestations of Neo-Ottomanism in the past decade can be seen in Somalia. Now, this is very interesting. Turkey took advantage of the African country's backwardness to operate its largest military base outside its borders, to establish a spaceport there. So Turkey wants to get into space. I'm not joking. They are planning on building a space shuttle in Somalia. I'm shocked that this never really made big news, but you can look into this. The Turks want to build a giant space shuttle in Somalia. Could you imagine astronauts going into space from Somalia? I mean, really, it's pretty crazy. Turkey took advantage of Somalia's, low socioeconomic status to establish a spaceport there and to explore for gas and oil. At the same time, Erdogan used the Gulf states' 2017 boycott of Qatar to permanently station 4,000 fighters in the emirate. So the Gulf states said, we don't like what Qatar is doing because Qatar keeps backing Islamic fundamentalism. And then what happened? Turkey said, okay, we'll just put soldiers in Qatar. And I just want to check something real quick. How many Turkish soldiers are in Qatar? 3,000 troops in Qatar. Wow. That's a pretty serious deployment. Israel woke up to the threat late. Yeah, that's an understatement. Israel actually helped to create the threat by backing the Syrian revolution, and then that has led to Turkey rising up even more. So Israel made a giant F-up. And really, like I've said, Israel's decisions are leading it to its own demise. Israel woke up to the threat late. It only happened when Ankara took advantage of the weakening of the Iranian axis during the war to overthrow the Assad regime. So the weakening of the Iranian axis, which country did that? That was Israel, because it defeated Hezbollah, crushed Hamas, bombed the Houthis. It weakened the entire Shiite axis, thus weakening Iran. And so with Iran weakened in the Middle East, thanks to Israel, Turkey said, let's take advantage of this. And then they took over Syria. So Israel, in its fight against Iran, has been helping the rise of Turkey. And now it's terrified of Turkey. It has effectively created its own monster. So it established its regime in Syria with its proxy, Mr. Ahmed al-Shara. The Israeli public was widely exposed to Turkish influence on al-Shara after the end of the coup 6 months ago. But this is the product of a years-long investment that began long before Russia sank into the Ukrainian mud and Iran and its proxies took blows from Israel. Al-Shara was then established in the Idlib region. So before al-Shara became the president of Syria, he was the proxy leader for Turkey in the Idlib province. So what was happening in the Idlib province, which is in northern Syria, was a presaging sign for what was going to happen to the rest of Syria, and we're seeing that right now. Yeah, Israel jumped into the fire pan into the volcano. Yeah, from the fire pan into the volcano. Yep, exactly. Al-Shara was then established in the Idlib region with the help of constant economic and security support from Turkey. Without it, Al-Shara, which has been subject to sanctions for years due to its former senior position in Al-Qaeda, could not exist. But while most Iranian security sources are weaker than Israel, Turkey's only military disadvantage vis-a-vis Israel lies in its air force. So Iran is still way weaker than Turkey. So Israel was better off just dealing with Iran. Now they have to deal with a country that's not only the second most armed nation in NATO, is a regional superpower, but it's also a country that's way more powerful than the Iranians. Erdogan, who increased his defense budget by 17.5% this year to about $47 billion, was supposed to have F-35 aircraft like the IDF. But during Trump's first term, he insisted on purchasing the S-400 air defense system, which is Russian, and that pissed off the Americans, so the Americans said, no F-35s for you. He insisted on purchasing the S-400 air defense system from Russia, and Turkey was removed from Lockheed Martin's fifth-generation aircraft project. And then Turkey just said, okay, NATO, F you, we are going to just make our own damn aircraft, and they began to accelerate the production of the Khan fighter jet, which will be operational, I want to say, by 2029, maybe even earlier than that. However, now it appears that the US president is considering returning it to the F-35 project. And the reason why Trump wants to sell F-35s to Turkey is because Trump wants to keep Turkey within America's sphere. if you just let Turkey go gung-ho and do what it wants, or if you just tell Turkey, do whatever you want, Turkey, we're done with you, Turkey will say, okay, we'll just deepen ties with Russia because we don't want to deal with Russia right now, and then we're just going to expand ourselves in the Middle East. So then you would have a Turkish-Russian alliance. That would mean Russia having unlimited access from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, and that would make Russia even more powerful. Russia doesn't want to do this. The US doesn't want this to happen. Also, additional to that is the fact that Donald Trump stated very clearly that he will dismantle BRICS. Well, he wants to weaken Russia. Well, you don't weaken Russia by incentivizing the Turks to deepen ties with Russia. So you want to keep Turkey within your sphere of influence. So how do you do that? You please the Turks. Oh, Turkey, and this is clearly exemplified by Trump. Oh, remember what Trump said. The key to Syria is Turkey. Oh, congratulations, Erdogan. You did what no one else could do. You took over Syria. Congratulations. And look at what Donald Trump did recently. He appointed the U.S. ambassador to Turkey to be the mediator between Israel and Turkey. Why? Between al-Shara and the United States. Why is it that America's representative to al-Shara just so happens to be the American ambassador to Turkey? Because this is Turkey's project, and the U.S. is catering to Turkey's aspirations of empire. It's really that plain and simple. I never went to university. I never worked for a think tank, but this is just me reading stuff and observing things. Trump even said about 2 months ago about his Turkish counterpart, Mr. Erdogan, I love him. I love the guy. He's great. Sorry, Israel. You see, and this is what, oh my God. This is what people are referring to when they talk about this rift between Trump and Netanyahu, and really between the US and Israel. And this is a fascinating topic. I don't think it is entirely hot air, given the fact that Turkey is a serious ally of the US and it is a serious member of NATO. Turkey and Israel hate each other. Turkey and Israel are enemies. Turkey and Israel are eventually going to clash. At the same time, the United States does not want to lose Turkey. So America is doing things that pisses off the Israelis, like empowering the Turks, like entertaining the idea of selling F-35s to Turkey. And if they do this, it would thus remove Israel's military edge in the Middle East, because it would make Turkey the most powerful country in the Middle East. Israel hates this. America doesn't care, because America doesn't want to lose Turkey. They want to keep Turkey within its sphere of influence. So right now, the biggest winner is Turkey. Yes, Israel is killing and starving a bunch of kids in Gaza and saying, look, we're winning. Look at how tough and victorious we are. But truly, truly, when it comes down to it, Israel is scared shitless. Yes, they're very tough when they kill Gazans who are really a helpless people. Let's be real here. Yes, they're very tough when they're blowing up beepers in Lebanon. They're very tough when they're blowing up the Houthi rolls in Yemen. But when it comes down to reality, when it comes down to actually facing a truly serious conventional military, Israel is scared shitless. They are. They just want, let me tell you something. The average Israeli just wants to go and eat hummus and falafel and dance in the nightclubs in Tel Aviv. That's what they're interested in. They don't want to go into some serious war. Now, they don't mind blowing the shit out of civilians in a freaking fishbowl of a city called Gaza. It's a fishbowl. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. And when they hear about people getting blown up in Gaza, they start dancing and mocking the dead. Oh, I've seen this before. But when it comes down to a serious, conventional military force that's allied with the US, that's a major member of NATO, Israel is going to shit its pants. They're terrified. They are terrified. That's why they want to get guarantees from the Americans that America's going to help them in a war with Iran, because Iran also has a serious military force. I mean, let's be real here. It's nothing just to make fun of. It's not as powerful as Turkey, but it's still serious. Israel doesn't want to deal with that. Now, when it comes to killing kids and starving kids, yeah, they'll laugh and dance, and they'll do their little Hava Lolita Hava dances, but when it comes to serious war, Israel's fucked, to put it bluntly. That's why Trump is pissing off the Israelis, because Trump doesn't want to lose Turkey. So Trump is appealing to the Turks. This terrifies the Israelis. And then there is this conversation between Trump and Netanyahu, and supposedly, reportedly, the conversation was heated, and Trump told Netanyahu, "You're not going to tell us what to do." I don't know. I keep telling people, America's going to throw Israel under the bus. Nobody believed me. They said, "Oh, America's a cooked Zionist country." You guys don't understand America. That's the thing about Americans. You guys don't understand America. I am an American. At the same time, I come from an immigrant background. Parents were immigrants, okay? So I have a slightly different perspective on the country just from my upbringing. And I can tell you right now, most Americans don't even understand America. And I know this because they were Americans that were saying that Kamala Harris was gonna win. And they were dead serious. I said, man, you guys don't understand America. This is like saying a fat guy is going to become the president. Fat boy ain't going to become the president because Americans look down on fat people. Fat boy ain't going to become the president. It's like Chris Christie. He just not going to become the president because he's fat. Bottom line. Americans, when it comes to voting for maybe for a governor, they're a little bit more lenient. When it comes to a president, they are more judgmental than a valley girl in California. They're more judgmental than a fresa snob in Mexico. It's the damn truth. Americans don't understand Americans. They don't. And I'm telling people, one thing I know about America is that it eventually will screw over its allies. Israel is not exempt. But America's a Zionist country. America is America. And America is going to do something because it's in its interest, regardless of whether Israel wants to or not, wants that or not. So, if Turkey is in America's interest, Turkey is going to be in America's interest, regardless of what Israel says, regardless of the objections of the Israeli state. So, eventually America is just going to throw Israel under the bus. Turkey, you're not that guy, pal. Trust me, you're not that guy. Yeah, exactly. You're not that guy. Yeah, you're not that guy. You're not. You're a small country with what? How many people live in Israel? 10 million people. You have a nice little powerful military, don't get me wrong. You have nukes. We all know you have nukes. You're not the biggest dog on the block. And eventually, America is going to throw Israel under the bus. It's going to happen. And when I first began to say that, I myself had difficulty believing what I was saying, but I kind of felt it in my gut that this is what eventually will happen, because the Bible makes it very clear. The book of Zechariah says that only only a third of Israel is going to survive. Well, that means that 2/3 are going to get killed. So if Israel is going to be destroyed, if Israel's going to be vanquished, devastated, that means it's going to be abandoned. That means its allies will have abandoned it, and that means that Israel will no longer have the defenses of its allies. And that's how I came to that conclusion. And so you're seeing it playing out, right? You're seeing all these stories, tension between Trump and Netanyahu, a rift between the U.S. and the Israelis, et cetera, the American population becoming more and more indifferent towards Israel or hostile towards Israel. You're seeing all these little signs, and all these little signs are indications that the eventual denouement of this all is going to be Israel becoming abandoned. So it says here, as in many areas, Erdogan does not want to rely on outside sources when it comes to aircraft. That is why Turkey is developing its own fifth-generation aircraft, the Khan, as I have already said, which made its maiden flight in February 2024. It is expected to have 3 prototypes next year, with the hope that by the end of the decade, the aircraft will be operational. And this is going to be a fifth-generation fighter jet. So here's the thing. You could say, well, if Trump allows Turkey to have F-35s, then, oh my God, you're going to have this powerful Turkish Air Force and Turkey's going to have an edge over Israel. And that's true. But even if Donald Trump doesn't give the F-35s to Turkey, let's say Turkey never gets F-35s, the Khan 5th generation fighter jet is still going to be operational. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. Therefore, Turkey is still going to have an edge. They're still going to have a 5th generation Air Force capability that's going to be very dangerous. Now, I suspect, I could be wrong, but I suspect that Turkey will get F-35s. And the reason why I say that is because America loves the military business. It's all about the military-industrial complex. And so Turkey is a potential customer. Why lose business? So I think that eventually the U.S. is going to say, okay, we're going to sell you F-35s. It's because it's a business. Plus, America doesn't want to lose Turkey. So I think that eventually the F-35s will come. But even if they don't come, let's say I'm wrong, even if they don't come, the Khan is still coming. And you can't stop what's coming.